While President Biden is busy putting children in cages, notice the bars? Those look like cages. And the media is busy trying to call those things anything other than cages. We've actually got the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, chalking up a win against the Biden administration and their plan to halt deportations for 100 days. Now, deportations are not some quick thing. It's not like someone is walking by and the deport police come and grab them and throw them over whatever border, like back into Canada or whatever. It's actually a very long process, and a lot of legal protections are afforded to people who aren't in our country legally. They still get a lot of legal protections, and they're still under the jurisdiction of the Constitution, so they're entitled to lots of rights. Because of that, the process is slow and takes a long time and has a lot involved in it. And also because of that, this 100-day deportation ban would look to clog up the system. It would develop a backlog, and that backlog's burden would be pushed down on the states who have to track, clothe, feed, otherwise take care of these people if they're being detained, or they would have to release them, and then there could be a burden on public programs and stuff like that. The idea behind the 100-day deportation ban is ultimately to mess up the system and then justify action due to a crisis that's created. Yes, that's what it is. If you think differently, I mean, go ahead and tell me, but at the end of the day, that's what they're doing. But instead of that happening, a federal judge in Texas has shut this thing down. Now, this isn't the first time this happened. This order was signed the day, I believe. Yes, the day of the inauguration. So Biden gets into office, and within hours of getting into office, this is the first thing he does, is he goes ahead and shuts down deportations. And again, these are people who have been through the legal process and are getting deported. This isn't some person who's just picked up on the street today getting catapulted into some other country. That's not how deportation actually works. So we've got in this article from the Austin American-Statesman, and all these links are down in the description below if you want to check them out for yourself. It says, granting a nationwide injunction request by Texas officials, a federal judge has blocked the Biden administration's plan to pause deportations for 100 days after a comprehensive review of immigration enforcement. U.S. District Judge Drew Tipton of Corpus Christi, appointed by former President Donald Trump last summer, had issued a temporary order halting the enforcement of the deportation freeze on January 6th. So, like I said, this happened very quickly in late January, right after inauguration, and Ken Paxton's office immediately filed for an injunction against this to stop them from not enforcing immigration law. And the judge said, "Yeah, you get a temporary order." And that order was for about a month. That order was set to expire, so they had to go ahead and update it. So, late Tuesday night, shortly before that temporary order was set to expire, Tipton ruled that the pause exceeded the president's authority because it improperly suspended or altered a federal law requiring deportation within certain deadlines. Congress made a law about deportation and how it works. The president doesn't just get to unilaterally ignore those restraints. They have to go through a process to do that. They are the executive, and they can restrict their enforcement of certain laws, but they can't do it arbitrarily and capriciously. Tipton also said the order violated federal law because it was arbitrary and capricious, showing none of the legally required analysis on the reasons for the pause or its impact on states like Texas. So that is the big problem there, and that is why this order took place. Now, significantly, Tipton's ruling focused on the requirements of federal law and did not consider the legality of an agreement quietly signed by state and federal officials in the closing days of the Trump administration that requires the Department of Homeland Security to give Texas officials 180 days notice before changing immigration enforcement in the state. Now, they did that. That agreement isn't necessarily binding. That would have to be challenged, but they did sign that agreement, and that was part of their initial complaint, but the judge didn't use that to make this decision. And that's very important because that would probably be appealable and could be overturned. I mean, all of this is still appealable. This is at the district court level. The question is whether or not they'll take it up to the Fifth Circuit and what the Fifth Circuit will decide to do at that point. But I just want to point out that agreement between Texas and the U.S. government for 180 days notice isn't necessarily binding. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who signed the agreement on December 31st with Greg Abbott, argued that it also required federal officials to discuss immigration changes in advance. The Biden lawyers had argued that the agreement was illegal because no state can have veto power over federal immigration authority. They also said outgoing presidents could not make binding policy decisions for their successors via agreements with the states. This is interesting because technically Congress sets the laws on immigration and naturalization. So it's almost like the executive doesn't get that authority over Congress either. And that's what the judge is kind of ruling in this case. Said you can't do that. So the pause was intended to let the agency focus on its most pressing needs, particularly at the busy southern border amid an ongoing pandemic. Was it, though? The agency also sought to assess the resources needed to conduct immigration and asylum proceedings fairly and efficiently. By not conducting them and creating a giant backlog, trust me, this is not what they were doing. Pekoske said, noting that the freeze excluded non-citizens who are suspected of terrorism or espionage or are found to pose a security threat. Texas sued on January 22nd, the day the freeze was intended to take effect, arguing it would endanger Texas citizens and law enforcement. But in this most recent ruling, Tipton focused on Texas' arguments that the pause would cause financial harm, higher than anticipated costs for jailing those charged with crimes and for teaching children in public schools if non-citizens would be released instead of deported. Quote, Texas has established by a preponderance of the evidence that it could reasonably expect a 100-day pause to lead to a significant number of criminal aliens and unaccompanied children moving freely within and into Texas who would otherwise be removed, the judge wrote. And that is, of course, the problem with the federal government choosing arbitrarily to end immigration enforcement. That immigration enforcement doesn't affect Washington, D.C. anywhere near the rate it affects a place like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California, even Florida. These places have higher influxes of unlawful border crossings than Washington, D.C. does, and they have to deal with them in a different way. And if those people are not detained and then returned back across the border that they crossed in the first place, then those people become a burden on the state system, and the state isn't allowed to enforce against them in the way that the federal government would. I'm sure if the federal government doesn't want to deport people, Texas would be happy to go on a deportation spree. Seems kind of like a Texas thing to do. But I don't know. But it doesn't matter. The states rely on the federal government to enforce their borders. And these states happen to share a border with another nation rather than just with other states. And it's then incumbent upon the administration to take care of that. They shut it down without doing the proper legal analysis. They got slapped down for it, and that is the right decision. So, that being said, we will continue to watch. This is still a temporary injunction. This is a renewal of that temporary preliminary injunction. Now, the Biden campaign can decide to either appeal the injunction order or they can take it to trial to see if it will be a permanent injunction if they want to fight it at the district court level rather than appealing the temporary injunction straight up to the state, to the appellate courts. We will see what they do. I'll be following along. Drop a comment down below and let me know what you think about this issue, about immigration on its own, and about Ken Paxton, who is going to get a lot of press over the next couple of years. All right, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for watching. Peace. Peace.